Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Unleash the Power of an Integrated Imaging and EDC Platform, presented by Medidata. I'm Ricardo Castano, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Our speakers today are Dan Braga, Vice President of Product Management and Imaging Solutions at Medidata, and Troy Schneider, Senior Director of Imaging Strategy at Medidata. You can read their full bios on the left side of your window by selecting the Speakers tab. Just a few technical notes before we begin. The webcast is being streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your volume is up. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. Time permitting, we will follow the presentations with a Q&A session. Please submit your questions using the Questions and Answers tab on the left side of your screen. Okay, now let's begin. Dan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining, everyone. Again, my name is Dan Braga, VP of Product Management in Medidata, and we are joined again by Troy Schneider, our Senior Director of Imaging Strategy. Today's webinar is entitled Unleashing the Power of an Integrated Imaging and EDC Platform. We plan to first set the stage and present what we are hearing from the industry, then introduce how Medidata has added value to the pain points that we continue to hear about. Next, Troy will review what he is hearing from the core labs, CROs, and sponsors that are utilizing our integrated platform, and most importantly, cover some metrics illustrating the success that our clients have had. And finally, we'll get a quick demo of what an integrated imaging and EDC environment looks like. Before we get started, I wanted to take a quick minute to get some feedback from you. Using the polling tool in your webinar window, we are interested in knowing what the biggest challenges that you are faced with imaging in clinical trials. Site ease of use. How efficient is it for sites to submit data in a reliable manner? Perhaps imaging reconciliation processes. How do you connect data acquired in disparate systems with data in your EDC? Or perhaps lack of visibility to the imaging statuses, just knowing what was done, when it was done, and so on. And then lastly, the viewing of medical images. We'll give it a few more seconds for you guys to respond. Great. Well, thanks to everyone for the feedback. And it looks like it's pretty evenly spread across the board in terms of the issues that you are faced with. And I think this ties in well with the rest of our presentation. To kick things off, and to add to the feedback that you just provided, I wanted to discuss what we are hearing from our clients, not only from our clients, but really the industry in general, the prospects that we engage with, and the sites that use our technology. There are some very common themes. First, why is imaging data on a different platform? We hear this from sponsors, and we definitely hear this from sites. Why do I log into so many systems? More on that later. We also hear about core labs and why most to all of them use disparate and separate technologies. Again, people are asking why. More and more sponsors are asking about archiving. If images go directly to my core labs, how do I archive them? Aren't we supposed to be archiving this data? And finally, and most importantly perhaps, data reconciliation. We hear why, how, we hear it all. In general, the questions and feedback we get are all focused on imaging data residing in separate solutions from the rest of the clinical trial. Why is that? The pain points with the old way of doing things are very apparent. Whether study delays, the costs associated with developing new trials versus configuring new trials, or the disconnected processes when using multiple systems. All of this is a pain for sponsors, CROs, core labs, and most importantly, the sites. Next, let's take a look at where the industry was with imaging technologies and where it is today. As you can see here, sponsors used different vendors for each function. For imaging, sponsors used different systems for each core lab as well, making matters even worse. We hear from sites more and more about the frustration that this leads to. What system do I use? What password? What URL? For which sponsors? For which trials? And so on. Now let's take a look at where things generally stand now. More and more of the clinical systems used by sponsors have been standardized onto the Medidata platform. But look at the imaging data, still siloed. Remember, this is oftentimes a sponsor's largest data set in terms of size, but also oftentimes the most costly to acquire. However, it still remains on these disparate systems as offered by the core labs of choice. Finally, let's look at where the industry is going, what opportunities are truly available to sponsors today. First, sponsors should be able to use whatever core labs they want. We are supporters of that mission. However, using Core Lab A or Core Lab B or whoever it is should not result in a different technology platform each time. Sponsors are increasingly using core labs that are plugged into the Medidata platform, resulting in all clinical data, including imaging data, residing in one place. You still have the control over the core lab you use, and sure, as asked what seems to be like on a weekly basis, we can help direct you to those core labs that are already on the same technology platform. But again, the choice is still yours because it's on your technology platform. Want to add a new core lab? No problem. You can see here Core Lab D was added, all on the same technology platform. Or, as we're starting to see with many sponsors, you can consolidate and use less core labs as well. We have large and sophisticated core labs already on the platform that can help make that shift a reality. Again, the choice is yours. On a quick related side note, in a recent poll of site users were 6 times more likely to participate than not in a study if on the Medidata platform. This truly speaks to the desire to simplify things and bring all data, including imaging, together rather than siloed across so many solutions. Overall, the integration of your EDC and imaging solutions on a single platform brings significant value to everyone involved. First, gain visibility into imaging activities, or even the images themselves, on your own technology. Don't present sites with yet another solution to use based upon what core lab you work with. Next, eliminate data reconciliation. The time and money wasted on this activity is shocking at times. This should be done automatically and in real time. Next, get studies started faster. Rave Imaging is a platform that is highly configurable. No developers required, just a UI-based configuration. Want to learn to do it on your own? That's an option too. It's all about scale and getting started faster. And finally, control. Take control of your data. Where is it all now? What systems is it on? Is it being archived? Should it be archived? Now that we have an understanding of the industry and what we are hearing, let's turn things over to Troy Schneider to take a deeper look into the business value and overall metrics. Troy?
Thank you, Dan. So I wanted to start with some background first. You know, we had a roadshow around 2 years ago based on this simple idea, that imaging data should really be centralized and standardized, just like you treat your clinical data. To help develop this idea, we met with a large variety of Rave users, and we just listened. We listened to the many stakeholders in the data flow process and heard their frustrations. Many of them knew there had to be a better way, especially considering today's adaptive and complex trial designs, to sync critical imaging data with the clinical data. Even more so when imaging is a primary endpoint, like in oncology and medical device in the study. And as you just showcased, Dan, until recently, the industry has been following the same process without knowing that there is a better option. This old process where sites log into a separate system, sometimes separate workstations for each study, and have to retype their trial ID, subject, and visit info, and then try to upload the images to multiple systems that are connected to each study. Meanwhile, the sponsor and the data management CRO are often left in the dark on how the entire imaging process is going. We really wanted to change that at Medidata, and we did. Medidata, with our partners' help, set out to really change the game on how sites and sponsors viewed and handled imaging data. We wanted sponsors and CROs to rethink how they've always done it and start to look more at the future state, considering imaging's growing importance in studies. Fast forward after that roadshow we did 2 years ago, and it's now just been over a year since we released our upgraded integration between Rave Imaging and Rave EDC. I know a lot of user feedback from sites and sponsors went into that release, combining these two systems, and the market is really embracing that shift. Turns out sponsors and CROs were ready to act on our idea. They're ready to change the game on how they handle their imaging data, including how they acquire, de-identify, connect, and speak to their imaging vendors, and intelligently store this data for future use cases. This was a giant shift in the industry built around the one system, one sign-on, and single source of truth concept. As you can see here by these numbers, this one system approach has really excited all areas of the industry. Many legacy Rave EDC clients have moved to this unified system, including smaller biotechs, larger pharmaceutical companies, and especially medical device companies and CROs. As Dan mentioned earlier, the reasons for this growth are many. However, when building our first studies with a new sponsor, the 4 main areas they tell our project teams about why they moved to one system are around these 4 areas: visibility, integration, speed, and ultimately control. One of the most important in today's environment is visibility. In fact, here's a novel thought. Let's finally allow sponsors running studies and CROs to finally see where all their images are in the process and not wait every week or every month for a custom report from their imaging vendor. For example, if I'm a medical device sponsor running a study and I want to see where all my echocardiograms and angios are in my process, let's show that data in real time in the EDC tool. Let's show where are all my echoes, when was the actual scan taken, when was the actual file uploaded, who uploaded it, and when was it received by the core lab. And more importantly, let's also show what's missing. Where are all my CTs at any given time? And actually, we decided to be really bold and actually allow stakeholders to view the images in this system in our regulatory approved viewing tool without downloading anything. So imagine now you're working on an early phase or translational study or a feasibility study for a medical device company. You now have the ability to view in an FDA compliant tool all the images in near real time, and better yet, collaborate with the stakeholders at the site over these images and do your analysis and measurements. Integration was the second area we focused on. So instead of custom building clunky APIs and customizing these for each particular study, let's make it seamless with this one system approach, allow the sites ease of use from day one, and have this data flowing bi-directionally. Then we focused on speed. You have a million things to do when running these studies. Let's make collecting these images and site startup super easy and ready in a matter of days so you can start collecting and cleaning these images and getting them read ready faster than ever. And then ultimately control. If you own the technology, you kind of own the data and the process. So this gives you the flexibility of plugging in multiple core labs or multiple groups at academic centers. This gives you the comfort of knowing if you're doing a collect and hold or a study involving site or local reads, that you can have these centrally read because you own that data and you have a centralized place where all the images live, and you can flip that switch at any time and control that process. By Medidata focusing on improving visibility, speed, and giving sponsors more control, we're able to show some remarkable performance metrics when using imaging vendors. For example, we're showing an 86% increase in read-ready time. The Rave EDC plus imaging system is very configurable, and build teams can actually copy and paste validated study shells of common trial designs for even more efficiencies. Sites do not need to install anything to get started, so sites are ready from day one. We're also showing with our partners a 66% reduction in image prep time, thanks to our advanced protocol edit checks and having the data feed directly from Rave EDC already built in around the images. And probably the most impressive is that in addition to our over 80% reduction in queries thanks to our image upload process, we saw a staggering 24% decrease in queries thanks to the unification of Rave EDC and imaging. As for the first time, imaging reviewers and radiologists and imaging teams have the full picture, removing question marks, such as is this the right subject, the right trial, and site info automatically being in place, plus additional information, such as is this a revision? What is this subject's prior radiotherapy? And even key patient demographic data from the EDC. This really reduces overall questions that your imaging radiologists and QC teams have, driving down queries and potential issues. As you can see, we really streamline the data process, and this type of performance can really impact all types of studies in many different ways. As we will show in the demo in a few moments, one of the reasons for the high adoption rate, over 300% last year, is the flexibility of Rave imaging for different use cases for both pharmaceutical and med device companies. First, I think it's important to note that Rave imaging is a series of configurable modules, none of which require any downloads from the site or sponsors to use the power in these tools. All are in the Medidata cloud and ready to go for your study. For example, some sponsors use our full system in its entirety from soup to nuts. So they count on Rave imaging for image collection, de-identifications, making sure the images match the protocol every single time, QC, and then the ability to analyze these images and have imaging CRFs completed, even with adjudication and reports. Whereas some sponsors use it just to get an image securely and compliantly from point A to point B. Either way, the system ensures we're getting the right image and the right data to the right person in your study at the right time. As we've seen, those performance metrics impact all types of studies, such as early phase and translational studies. Early phase studies, it's often really important to look at images in near real time to look for response and make quick decisions on budgeting and overall progress on a study. So having a tool where you can actually view the images and collect that data and collaborate with a local oncologist or a local radiologist is very important. Site and local reads. Perhaps you're having your radiologist or an independent radiologist perform the reviews and assessments on site where your subjects are going or where your PIs are. This is really helpful and valuable. However, we're starting to see a major trend in the industry that our technology is supporting. Let's go ahead and centrally collect those images in a centralized place like Rave imaging as an insurance policy. So from the time you're ready to move from local reads to having a large commercial or academic core lab provide central reading services, you can flip a switch and have those pipes opened up to your imaging provider and start that process without having to go back and collect that data. Plus, you're building your imaging repository and imaging assets for future use cases. Another popular one that has momentum is collect and hold studies. This is perfect on our tool as it allows the sponsor the ultimate flexibility when you're ready to plug in your imaging vendor or multiple imaging vendors at any time, making it very easy. And then obviously where Medidata really thrives as well is late phase, your IDE studies, and then any of your phase 4s and observational studies. The flexibility and the global footprint really allow the unification of the systems shine. Since we handle many different types of trials, it's vital to know we can partner with many different imaging providers. We're excited to share that we now have over 70 imaging partners connected. We really want to focus, just as Medidata does, on the software around image management. How can we make it easy for the sites? How can we provide sponsors and CROs greater visibility and integration? And how can we do this faster and more securely? We again want to focus on the science, or on the software, and let the imaging partners focus on the science around the imaging. For example, helping you advise on your protocols and the actual scanning techniques. We are imaging partner agnostic, and this should excite you as a sponsor or CRO. We can connect over 70 different partners in this space, from CROs to imaging CROs to commercial core labs, academic core labs, and even system integrators. This includes several CROs that are accredited to build rave imaging, and even a handful that provide the technology and services to build rave EDC and rave imaging, giving you even maximum benefits. In fact, here's a testimonial around the trust that a major CRO had in the system from one of our partners that adopted rave imaging. It's really helped them drive both commercial metrics around growth, but also back office efficiencies. Speaking of back office efficiencies, we have another poll. So if you could look at your Fierce window here, really be interested in getting your opinion on this, as this is a big topic we've been trying to tackle at Medidata with our rave EDC clients. So the question is, how much time is spent on imaging data reconciliation and imaging communications each month per your study team? So again, how much time do you feel like your team is spending on imaging data reconciliation and imaging communications each month? We have 2 to 20 hours, 21 to 40 hours. Again, this is each month, 41 to 60, and then over 60 hours a month. See the results still coming in. Thank you. So as you can see, a considerable number of study teams are spending 21 to 40 hours per month. And if you look at an average study being 36 months and in the device space possibly 60 months, the 20 to 40 hours per month add up incredibly quickly. That's a lot of FTEs and a lot of energy on your data management and clinical operations team being spent on voicemails, emails, talking to your imaging providers on sites on missing images, and getting that data back into your EDC tool. When we did a case study with a leading pharmaceutical company and medical device company, what's interesting in this area is we actually found that we reduced that time, we reduced that 20 to 40 hours per month, 96%. So we saw a 96% reduction of time spent reconciling imaging data. So all of a sudden, as we mentioned, this really changed the game. So for the first time, we have the ability in near real time to take off the DICOM headers that key metadata off the scanners and send it immediately into your rave EDC tool. To give you a sneak peek what that looks like before Dan goes through the demo, here's a snapshot of rave EDC. So many of you that use rave are familiar with this, and some of you are considering rave for future use cases. So this is the gold standard in EDC tools across the globe. As you can see, for the first time on your left side, we have an image submission details tab. So any study coordinator, anyone in data management, anyone working on the study that has the correct permissions can actually click on image submission details and see, in a matter of seconds, all of their imaging detail. So here we're showing when an image was collected, when it was uploaded, what type of image it was, and let's provide a timestamp and even the user's initials of who uploaded it. We can even show the date and time that it's passed QC and became read ready. So this gives you a complete look at what's going on with all your imaging data, and it lets you also see potentially what's missing or flag any issues before they become problems. So again, we cut that down for data management team 96%, which actually allowed those FTEs to focus on more vital things in the study. To dive more into the areas, the bidirectional data flow and how we set up our software around the unification of rave EDC and rave imaging, I'm going to turn it back over to Dan Braga to provide an overview of the tool. Dan?
Sounds great. Thanks, Troy. For this quick demo, we plan to focus on 3 key areas. First, the bidirectional data flow between rave EDC and imaging. Next, real-time data reconciliation. and then to close things out, a few looks at other parts of the imaging platform that you may not have been aware of. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I am logged into RayVDC and have selected a trial and a subject. You can see here the structure of the trials, including visits and the data within each visit. One of the things that we added was a new tab for imaging data. First, let's look at imaging submission details. This real-time reconciliation data shows exactly what is being uploaded, what requirements are being fulfilled, and when it is happening. No logging into other systems, no thinking about what imaging platform was used, just one system for everything. Next, let's look at workflow summary. Here you can see what has been done with the data that has been submitted. Where is it in the process? Who has reviewed it? Who has not? Knowing the data has been submitted is one thing, but knowing exactly where it is in real time within the workflow takes things to a new level. Remember, the choice of the core lab is still yours, but this just puts everything on your technology platform. And finally, let's look at the actual CRF data. Remember, each trial config will dictate when and if this is available. Looking at this example, you can see that specific RECIST calculations and other data that were collected in imaging are immediately part of your broader RayEDC data set. In summary, all collected data from the imaging solution is immediately available and part of the broader Medidata platform. Now let's look at data that is collected within RayEDC. One of the things that we hear about from the industry are the frustrations with double data entry. Why enter a patient's date of birth and gender into RayEDC only to have to enter again in another imaging platform, for example? Any and all data points as appropriate that are collected in RayEDC are made available to your reviewers and other users in Rave Imaging. In addition to, and perhaps even starting with, subjects are available across both solutions as well. No need to create a subject twice, as subjects created in RayEDC are automatically created in Rave Imaging. Let's jump over to a view that Core Labs would have now, for example. This particular trial requires that a core lab have access to a few of the data points originally collected in RayEDC, however, not to everything else. You can see here that I've selected a subject and that certain data points are automatically presented. First, we can present data at the broader subject level that is always available when looking at a specific subject. Or we can present data at the visit level that is visit specific and only shown when looking at that particular visit. Either way, never will double data entry be required, and data will seamlessly be presented between RayEDC and imaging in an efficient and streamlined manner. To close things out, I wanted to show a few cool things we are doing in other parts of the imaging platform. First, let's look at our medical image viewer. This full-featured PACS viewer requires no software to ever be installed locally and runs completely in the web browser. This provides instant scalability across reviewers no matter what their IT infrastructure is. It even works on Macs. Next, all image uploads can be done with an HTML5 zero footprint upload tool. Again, no software to install, ever, making scalability and site startup that much easier. We still attack things like edit checks and de-identification in the same powerful manner, ensuring that the data uploaded to your trials is the right data for the appropriate visit and requirement. In summary, a unified EDC and imaging environment just makes sense. It adds value to everyone in the process, whether sites, sponsors, CROs, and core labs, and most importantly, the patients. It is a single source of truth for your EDC and imaging data, all under one umbrella. It decreases study build times and makes getting started with imaging trials that much easier. It decreases costs. Queries are lower, and we're already super low on our platform even before the integration with Rave EDC. And finally, we have significant scale across large and small pharma and medical device companies in all therapeutic areas. But our innovation goes way beyond just EDC unification. We are actively working on many things, such as artificial intelligence in imaging and how that can be leveraged to enhance the overall process, from advanced PHI detection tools and more. We are always looking at advanced viewing tools and how we can both make them better as well as add more capabilities across additional therapeutic areas. Next, we are really starting to get more and more involved into the analytics side of things. Medidata has a deep history of providing advanced insights into the data that is collected. With our Shift analytics capabilities, we're even taking things further, including imaging data. And finally, how can we make it easier to acquire data? We go far beyond the uploading of medical images over the web and are constantly exploring and implementing better ways to get data out of a hospital, both imaging data as well as EMR data, to take the submission of data in a clinical trial to a whole new level. At this time, this concludes our general session. We would like to open things up for Q&A.
All right. So yes, let's move on to the Q&A. There is still time to submit your questions using the Q&A tab to the left side of your screen. We have lots of great questions already, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So the first one here asks, you mentioned additional advanced viewing tools. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So this is an area we take very seriously because there's a lot of nuances in viewing tools. I'm actually going to have Dan. Dan, can you elaborate how you and your product team approach either integrating and allowing sponsors to access these different tools for different therapeutic areas?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, before we even get into that, we have a fully integrated and full functioning PACS viewer that's part of our standard environment. And as mentioned before, that is zero footprint, requires no software to be installed. But we're always looking at adding more, and that's typically therapeutic or a clinical trial, specific. And it could be an advanced reporting tool. It could be an advanced 3D tool that's required for a certain type of trial. So we look at the trial, and we look at what data is needed, what kind of analysis is needed. And if our standard viewing tool does not meet that need, we work with the sponsor and or the core lab or both to find the right tool to plug in. And again, advanced oncology applications, orthopedic applications, and more. There's always opportunities to streamline how the analysis of imaging is performed with specific viewing tools.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see. Our next question asks, how are you different than a core lab?
So good question, and one to address. So simplest terms, we're not a core lab. Core labs offer a variety of services really around the spectrum of imaging, and they really focus on the process around analyzing the images and the scientific aspects of it. So they're going to bring the radiologist and the expertise around particular areas. What Medidata is really good at is really focusing just on the software, so just on the technology. So just as Medidata partners with a lot of CROs to implement a lot of its tools, we do the same. So we work very closely in harmony with many of our imaging partners. Again, we want to focus on making it extremely easy for the site, whether it's the ability to send straight from a scanner, straight from their PAC system, have one system with one sign-on. we want to handle that piece, and we want to plug in all the appropriate viewing tools and focus on bidirectional data flow so we can really raise the bar in the industry in terms of image management software. Even going as far as helping large groups build imaging repositories. So we have these huge data assets in one place so we can start to let our scientific teams play with that data and see what new insights we can learn. That's the area Medidata plays in. We want to partner again with our core labs because they're a vital piece of the picture. They're going to bring the radiologists, so we want to send those images to them and let them do what they do best, which is actually analyze the images and put that data either into their system or back into Medidata. All in all, the full picture and all the imaging data would end back up in Rave EDC. So that's how we really view ourselves differently than a lab.
All right, thank you for elaborating. Let's see, our next question asks, are there any differences for medical device teams using your system?
Yes, so there are. So we have a tremendous amount of experience with medical device studies. I would say you saw earlier, we are nearing our 1,000th live project on the tool. Many of those are medical device studies. So I would say about 300 or so are running either early feasibility studies or first in human all the way to large pivotal and IDE studies for medical device across the globe. What's interesting for medical device is the concept that, unlike pharmaceutical, medical device studies rely on multiple imaging vendors. So they have multiple core labs based on either the key opinion leaders or the modality they're having looked at. So if I'm running a heart valve studies, I may be sending 3 different image types to 3 different imaging vendors. And that's the beauty of our system, is we give you one central place, for example, to upload your CT scan, your ultrasound, and your MRI. And we can send those to 3 different areas. So we can send 1 to an academic group, 2 to an independent reviewer, and 3 to a large medical device commercial lab. All 3 would get notifications that a new image is ready, has been de-identified, and put into their system for review. So that's kind of the beauty about how our tool works with medical device companies. Also, because we have, as Dan mentioned, the built-in viewing tool, it gives independent radiologists or medical device companies the ability to view these images within the tool and do things like review adverse events or hold screening committees to vote on patient enrollment. So we've really taken in a lot of the considerations that are needed to run a large medical device study into this tool, and it's an area our technology and our project teams have a lot of experience in.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's see, our next question asks, my core lab is telling me that their tech platform can do all of this. What's the difference?
So the difference is I touched it. Yeah, go Dan.
Oh, that's okay. So, my core lab is telling me that they can do all of this. We hear that a lot as well. And while core labs do offer technology platforms, why do it on another platform? As I presented earlier, sponsors should not and increasingly are running away from using different technology platforms for each trial based upon what the core lab offers or what core lab they selected. Core labs will and should use the solution that a sponsor ultimately wants to use to help sponsors adopt their single platform strategies that are in place. You putting the sponsors and putting the core labs aside, site satisfaction is something that we take very seriously here at Medidata. Medidata as a whole participates in many initiatives across that space. And sites are just unhappy. Sites are unhappy with having to use so many different technology solutions. When Core Lab A, presents one solution, Core Lab B another, Core Lab C another, and that sponsor is standardized on the Medidata platform for everything else, it just creates frustrations for those sites. So in some of those diagrams I showed earlier, a lot of sponsors are starting to consolidate, down to, starting to decrease the number of core labs that they're working with. And a lot of them are only working with core labs that are part of the Medidata platform. Is another big trend that we see. But the biggest thing is not presenting to your site yet another technology platform to use based upon each individual core lab that is selected. That's really hurting site performance and satisfaction. Troy, anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it all. What we've seen in our experience also is that many of the labs also then have to custom build some type of integration then with Rave EDC. And usually that involves a long ramp time to custom program CSV reports to be sent to EDC. And that has to be set up each study. So the data then has to be updated each time, and you're really increasing the ramp time to either study startup or database lock, having to repeat that setup every time versus having that unified centralized system and turning on the core lab services on the back end.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's see. Our next question asks, how do you handle data archiving and what options are available?
Dan, I know this is an area that your team is really passionate on, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, no problem. The archiving of data is something very commonly overlooked and forgotten about, especially when it resides on all these disparate solutions, on these kind of solutions as offered by the core labs. So we offer many options, both occurring in real time or after the trial is completed. As technologies for storage are changing so rapidly and so much, many wait until the end. However, many are getting more and more involved with the concept of a smart archive, wanting to archive in real time throughout the trial because the data is being acquired on their own technology platform. That's much easier to do. But more importantly than that, making use of the data you already have and do more interesting things, with it. So you've spent a lot of money to acquire this data and bring it in, and as mentioned before, it's oftentimes, the most expensive data within your clinical trial to acquire, both from a technology perspective as well as just the imaging costs in general. So why not do more with that data and kind of leverage what we call a smart archive? Bring the data in that makes it more useful to you, either during the clinical trial or after, or both. However, if the data is not on your own technology platform and you're scrambling at the end to bring that data in, whether on removable media or server access, or we've seen it all in terms of what some sponsors do. It's just very difficult to make better use of that data.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Our next question asks, do sites have to download anything to use this Rave EDC or Rave EDC and the imaging system?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And I think we covered this during the presentation, but we believe in scaling fast and have technologies in place that require zero downloads to the site. Sure, because we want to account for all, operating systems and browser types and, IT infrastructure that's out there on a global basis. There are certain situations where hospitals, may require a browser plugin based upon their individual specific needs. But we have, fully implemented zero footprint and HTML5 based tools that require nothing ever at any time to be installed at the site. And this really leads to our scalability and our ability to grow and get trials started quickly and efficiently.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Our next question asks, when you say image edit checks, can you elaborate on this? Are these checks on the DICOM header versus site entered data?
Yes. So this is an area where we've spent a lot of time and a lot of R&D driving the ability to make sure we have the right image at the right time, and really don't want to burden our imaging partners and the sites on having to go back and really look at that data with the goal of never having to make a patient come back in to be rescanned. That's kind of the ultimate failure in the system. And so what we've really spent a lot of time doing is analyzing how can we use technology, even some light AI that's coming, to really ensure that we have first the right patient let's make sure that's consistent. And then let's make sure that the images we're taking are compliant with the protocol and the imaging charter that's been set up. So let's look at all the data we have available, from the data that's in Rave EDC to the data that's in the protocol to how our imaging tool is configured to ensure that we have not only the right patient, but for instance, the slice thickness is correct. The table height is correct. Our sequencing is in order. Let's at least make sure that the field of view on the follow-up visits is the same field of view as time point 1. So we really, we have some trials where we have 4 or 5 basic edit checks in place. We have some where we have, believe it or not, over 100 running. And these can all be soft edit checks, so we can still allow the image to go through, but we want the site to notice we've noticed some things that may be off, so they can maybe do a double check. And in critical times, we can also even block that image from going through. Now that's rare, but there are certain trial designs where that's important. And so that's an area we've really focused on. Thank you.
And thank you. Let's see, our next question asks, are you able to connect with the Core Labs PACS?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that we're asked, very commonly. And Troy, presented earlier that, based upon the trial, the various modules of our, solution are used. Sometimes it's the soup to nuts, the acquisition all the way through trial workflow management to the actual review being done. Sometimes it's just the acquisition of data. So that's always standardized at your sites. So for core labs that have a specific viewing tool, and sometimes it's only for specific types of trials where a core lab uses one viewer over another, we can deliver the data exactly where it needs to go, so that the core labs are never receiving CDs, never manually, downloading data and putting it where it needs to go. So we have technologies in place at the core labs that as soon as data is submitted and ran through the various processes from a site, that data is automatically downloaded and put exactly where it needs to go. If that's a PACS and we use DICOM to push it to that, fantastic. Perhaps it's another viewing tool that just needs the images put into a certain folder structure on a certain workstation or server or network drive. We can do that as well, or both. Either way, data that's collected on our platform is going to be delivered exactly where it needs to go based upon the specific core lab's needs.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see. Our next question asks, can you accept non-image uploads, such as a PDF dossier for safety review?
Of course. So this is vital in this industry, is that we're not just good at handling DICOM files, so your traditional medical images like an X-ray or a ultrasound or an MRI, but in fact, the system can be used for really any file type. So we all know that some versions of Rave EDC have the ability to attach certain files or attachments. Really, those are intended for basic forms. However, the Rave imaging tool gives you the full ability to have those uploaded, de-identified still, and stored compliantly, plus with the benefit of having the advanced workflows in there. So we have many studies, some of which don't even have imaging requirements, using the tool to upload things like PDFs, even some PowerPoints or packages. We also have the ability to handle, obviously, non-DICOM files. So let's take those proprietary file types, and we can leave them in their native format, or if needed, we can actually convert them to DICOM. And we can also handle many different video file types and codecs. So let's upload those and have those, again, in the centralized place. You still get the benefits of the Rave EDC and imaging integration, so all that data can still show up into Rave EDC. You can still view all the images and thumbnails in the imaging tool, and you can still send them on the workflows we discussed earlier. But yes, we support all different types of files.
Well, thank you for elaborating. Let's see, our next question asks, does the platform have the ability to have images uploaded on clinical data CRFs?
So there's there's a few different assumptions I'm gonna make in that question. That'd be a good for a follow-up conversation. So this is where we'll get into some of the roadmap that Dan talked about earlier. So yes, you can upload clinical CRFs. You can actually parse out any images on the CRFs and put those in the tool to kick off those workflows or analysis. Also, we have the ability to capture any annotations or overlays or key images or presentation states on the image and save them. Since we're 21 CFR Part 11, if anyone is completing an imaging CRF on our tool, we can actually save those snapshots or key images or annotations as part of the overall package that's signed off and completed. For those that aren't familiar with the system, our imaging CRFs are insanely robust. So our formability is really powerful in how fast we can configure it and how we do our algorithms around tumor response and medical device studies, where we can collect that data quickly and pair it really nicely with the imaging data as well for a nice package at the end.
All right, thank you so much. Now, this will be our final question for today. We've had a lot of great questions today. We couldn't get to them all, but we will try our best to get back to everyone who submitted personally after the webinar. Let's see, our next question, final question asks, is image upload consistent across browsers now? I used MMI in the past, and there were different upload technologies depending on the browser used.
Yeah, that's great. I'll take that one, Troy. And that kind of comes back to very similar to a question asked previously about is software required to be installed? So the experience is consistent across the board. So whether you're using Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, just to hit on the more common browsers, the experience is the same. However, how those browsers operate can be different. But either way, you're still selecting the images. Our technologies still auto-scan. Our technologies still interrogate and look at the actual DICOM files. Our technologies still upload in the background, allowing you to continue on with whatever you were previously doing. All of our technologies allow you to do multiple uploads at the same time and so on. But and again, I think Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer at times and based upon different versions do dictate that certain plugins or certain other things are available. We see Chrome as more and more becoming the standard in different hospitals, and where zero footprint and HTML5 type solutions are the standard. So nothing has to be installed. Same thing with Firefox. Historically with Internet Explorer, many of you are aware of ActiveX controls. We've we've virtually eliminated Java. That's just not used anymore, and hospitals don't allow that use, and different browsers are blocking that. So we continue to keep up and continue to evolve and kind of stay ahead of the curve in terms of what types of browser tools are utilized. But the experience is always the same.
All right, thank you so much. Let's see, now for the final steps, I'll turn this back to Dan to read off the last slide for everyone.
Excellent. So again, thank you everybody for joining us today, and we'd love to continue the conversation. So as mentioned before, we will follow up with any of these questions that did not get answered during this session, follow up directly with you. We'll also follow up with you with links to the webinar, for future reference, as well as any other collateral, any other needs that you have. We'll definitely be in contact. Our contact information, myself and Troy, is on the screen here. If you guys want to have additional conversations, we can help coordinate that and help get you connected with the right team, as well as join ourselves. So again, thank you very much for joining today. Looks like we're ending almost right on time, and we appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.